Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Appraisal Buzzcast. The topic today is Appraisal Adaptation and Modernization. I'm Jim Morrison with the Appraisal Buzz, and today we have Joan Trice, our founder and CEO, who'll be interviewing George Opelka, the General Manager for ACI. George and Joan will be discussing the history of appraisal software, how things have changed for appraisers during the pandemic, and what appraisal modernization has in store for the industry. Joan, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Hey, George.
Good morning.
Old friend. Not to imply that either of us are as old as dirt, but we certainly have a very long history going back a couple of decades. So speaking of history, let's talk a little bit about ACI's history, because it's really had some major evolutions over the years. So why don't you share with us about where you've been, where you are, and where you want to go?
Sure, great. Hey, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited. I'm honored, and this will be some fun time we spend the next half hour or so. You know, first of all, it's probably, before I dive into history, it's because I'll forget if I don't, because I'm old. If I don't talk about it now, I'll forget it. So this has been an extremely event-filled year, as you know, and we've been through a lot together. And I mean everybody. I mean the GSEs. I mean FHA, VA. I mean our clients, appraisers, and getting consumers to the closing table. I really think appraisers have been the unsung hero in all of this. When you think about everything that's happened this year, from just historic interest rates and the number of transactions that have been pushed through the pipeline, and we still have a fixed number of appraisers. I really think that the effort that our community of appraisers has put forth is heroic. On Veterans Day today, we've got an industry full of veterans that are 50 something that my hat goes off to the men and women of our industry.
Agreed.
So we, with that said, hey, we've been through a lot together over the last, I'm in my fourth decade with ACI, and the company was founded by an appraiser, Richard Hine, who many of you know I've taken classes from over the years. And I don't want to spend too much time, going through history, but in order to understand, where we're going, I think we need to look back at our roots and see where we've come. So, if you look back the early days of let's just go back out in the field, when orders came into an appraiser over the phone, somebody had to be at the office to take an order. We went out in the field with a camera, with film, with, some of the people want to spend a little bit more money took an instant camera. We were dragging tape. Some people would drag a wheel, pull a wheel, clipboard, still a lot of people still carry a clipboard today. I remember having comp books in my car. We used to call it panning for gold.
Yeah.
So comp books. I was going to courthouses, going into the courthouse and going to the recorder's office, recorder of deeds. So dropping off reports at our clients, along with lunch. So those are kind of the old days, and things have obviously changed over the years. But even if you look back at the old days, I was going through, I don't know if anyone remembers Henry Harrison's old magazine, Real Estate Valuations.
Yeah.
This is a 1997 copy, 1997, not that long ago when you think about it. Every other page in here is selling film. Real Estate Graphics was selling rub-on arrows for our comp pages.
I love the rub-on arrows. I kind of miss those.
Yeah, and they got creative when they started putting subject and comps and site. But those were out there back then. Every other page in this magazine is film, pre-printed forms. I remember back in some of our early days, I visited this appraiser by the name of Jimmy Johnson, chief appraiser at Great Western Bank, and he was proud as heck that every one of their reports was handwritten. He eventually got religion, and we brought him into the age of software. So, but some of those early days, appraisers really helped drive a lot of the automation. A lot of people think, well, I hear appraisers aren't receptive to technology. That's garbage. Appraisers have really kind of pulled us along through Buck Rogers days over the last 30 years. When you look at some of the things that have advanced, we moved from all those archaic tools to, remember the fax machine took over the phone. The fax machine just changed our business because that's where all the orders went from phone to fax. And then we went from fax to standard forms, and standard forms gave birth the computer. The personal computer explosion really is what jettisoned our industry. So we started building, we had standardized forms. When the URAR came out in the mid to late 80s, then it really took off. Digital cameras came along, and all of a sudden those film guys in the magazine, they went away. So we replaced the film with digital cameras. And well, that was great. You know, the one thing it did do, it didn't necessarily reduce costs, because our toner costs went through the roof and our film costs went away. But what we did do is we shaved a day off the process. You know, there wasn't the one-day film, or the Polaroid film was a little bit too pricey. But the digital cameras really, that camera technology really started to evolve, and appraisers had a lot to do with that. You might not realize that, but at the time, we were the #1 reseller of digital cameras in the world for Kodak Digital Science.
Oh, that's
and
right.
that was,
I've forgotten that.
and that was because superstores hadn't really come to bear yet.
Right.
And this was really more of a B2B solution. So we had people from Rochester, New York, flying to Little Stevensville, Michigan, to talk to us about, hey, can you tell us about these appraisers and how they're using this technology? Because we want to build a next generation camera. So, you know, I remember that we were prototyping this camera, which ended up, this is the DC-50. Kodak came to town, and we thought this thing was a tank. It was so big, you know. I remember after they left our office, one of our developers put the Logitech logo on a microwave and saying, well, here's the new Kodak camera, you know, because it was so big. But a lot of the features that are in this camera were driven by appraisers. So, you know, it used to beep at us when you had like five photos left, those kind of things. So appraisers have had a lot to do with the modernization, so to speak, in the early days. So we went from that, digital cameras, personal computers, software, sketch. We finally rid of the rub-on maps, and we started getting electronic maps, or integrated maps into our system. So that's kind of, you know, I don't want to spend the whole day on that, but that's really where we've been. And what really, I would say, all those pieces coming together, form software, you know, form standard, digital cameras, sketch software, that gave birth to being able to build an electronic appraisal. Go ahead, Joan, you got a question or a comment?
Yeah, I do. Can we dial back even further, since we're both older than dirt? And let's talk about your dad for a minute, because I want to share a little piece of history that most appraisers aren't aware of. I mean, there's a lot of appraisers that are aware that your dad developed the Green Hornet, but I want you to talk about who owned the form and the appraisal process. I think most appraisers today, because it's only, you know, been in their lifetime or their career span, that Fannie and Freddie have more or less owned the appraisal process. So share with appraisers in our audience about your dad's contribution to the origins of the form.
Sure, I mean, love to. My late father, Greg Opelka, I think Lewis Allen once coined him as the grandfather of the URAR. But
right.
prior to the URAR, you know, my dad, he worked for a lender, savings and loan actually, and eventually we're just a savings bank. But he loved appraising, and it helped feed a family with 9 kids. Taught appraising in Chicago back in the 50s, and really to help pay the bills. And the U.S. League hired my dad back at that point in time. Actually, he taught appraising at the YMCA, of all places, in Chicago. Kind of cool. So the U.S. League, no longer around, the U.S. League hired my dad as a consultant to build what they called back then the PRA 17. And this is the Green Hornet. And PRA stands for Professional Residential Appraisal. You know, interestingly enough, it's got 3 comps in a box. It's got 3 approaches to value. It's got like the same thing we have today. It just has a different look to it, you know. It's got a grid with adjustments. It's got income approach, you know, cost approach. Even has a spot on the front to draw your sketch, you know, draw your sketch and staple your picture. So this form really was, I'd say, the catalyst. This came out in 1960. It was originally pitched to a bank in Indianapolis. I think it was Indianapolis Savings and Loan or Indianapolis Savings Bank. And they took a look at the form and they kind of laughed at it. And it didn't have a name other than PRA 17. And they said, hey, take your little Green Hornet and get out of here. Well, Green Hornet stuck, and it spread like wildfire just because of, just had just a cool connotation to it.
Yeah.
So that form, it really took root, had legs, and it became you could say it became the URA of choice back in the 60s. As time went on, Fannie really led the way back then, and worked closely with my dad. Actually, it was Mark Simpson, I think, who's now at Freddie, I believe. But Mark was really he was spearheading the effort at Freddie, and at the time, the Society Real Estate Appraisers, I believe, hired my dad as a consultant to work hand in hand with Fannie to come up with a URAR standard form. So the URAR, as we know it today, was developed in the house that I grew up in an application called BusyCalc, which eventually was acquired by Lotus Excel. So that form was really, you could say it was an industry initiative that was driven largely by the Society Real Estate Appraisers and Fannie Mae.
So Fannie and Freddie adopted the form, it was in the 70s, right?
It may have been called something else, but the URAR was like 86, I want to say.
Oh, it was that late. Okay. I was thinking that the early forms were in the 70s. So,
and
okay.
I think there were some other forms in between.
Okay.
But the URAR, as we know it today, I just remember because I had just taken my 101 class from the society from Dale Kozinski and Andy Burson, who I believe are both still around. But it was right about that time when I finished 101 was when that form was going on tour with training classes around the country. And that's about the time the PC was about ready to take off too. So when you think about the timing of standard forms, PC, that's really when
it all
that
came
was really
together at the same time. Hey,
it was a perfect
George,
storm. Yep.
Let's take this as an opportunity before we get into today and the here and now to break for a commercial message.
Thanks, Joan. Well, our first ad is from ACI. As a provider of innovative appraisal solutions for more than 40 years, ACI is a trusted industry leader. Join the thousands of appraisers and many of the largest appraisal companies that use the ACI software in US and Canada to optimize their business. The ACI One individual plan is available today for $649 and includes forms and rules, sketch software, unlimited location and flood maps, public record data, ACI Open House, and more. For more information, visit aciweb.com. Joan, back to you.
Thank you, Jim. So George, let's talk about what's going on in the appraisal world, over the last year. 2020 has certainly been, as you introduced in the beginning, an eventful year. Tell us what you and ACI have been doing to assist.
Like you said, it's been an eventful year. My hat goes off to just so many people that really help steer us all through this. At the end of the day, at ACI and most people play in my world, we color by number. We've got our orders being handed down to us from the GSEs or from Washington, so to speak. So, I think we were all heading in, we were all in modernization land already to some degree. But when the pandemic hit, I think if Fannie and Freddie were under the direction of the regulator, that they had to spin up a solution, in order to deal with the pandemic that would allow appraisers to continue on with their trade but also do it with safety and soundness in mind. I think that Fannie and Freddie collaborating in record time. I think, and correct me or keep me honest, Joan, I believe they spun up a solution within 10 days.
Yeah, we obviously introduced, we had the CRN platform to introduce the new protocols to lenders and AMCs. And then of course that trickled down to the appraisal community, and the CRN provided that great feedback loop for the GSEs, like what's working, what's not working, what do we need to tweak. And that was, they moved quickly, they responded quickly, and the appraisal community responded quickly. It's amazing how smoothly that happened.
I think we had to do something, whether or not, I think the GSEs were expecting greater adoption of the flexibilities, and which didn't necessarily happen, but I still think we took the right steps, the right measures, and people executed on those measures to provide the industry with options and really in the best interest of safety and soundness.
Right.
So what we did 5 things to help the cause and to provide, solutions. So the first thing we did is we updated addendum, updated limiting conditions, scope of work, certifications to accommodate the flexibilities. In addition to those and putting those in our appraiser-facing ACI software, we also embedded rules inside the software as well to make sure we kept appraisers on the right side of the road in the event that they were doing a desktop or an exterior. So there's just measures that we had to take to make sure that so we didn't have this tremendous revision request kickback because somebody forgot to put exterior in the map reference field, or they used the wrong form. So those are 2 of the 5 things that we did. Additionally, we in our world at ACI here, whether or not everybody, your entire audience knows, we kind of build, I often refer to as the pitcher and the catcher. We build technology for appraisers to assist in manufacturing appraisals. We also build compliance technology that sits between the appraiser and their client, whether it's the lender or the AMC. We've got compliance technology that consumes appraisals and provides instant feedback with respect to compliance. So we also had to, as a third step that we took in supporting the flexibility, is we had to have compliance in place to support that initiative too. So we updated the software, we updated the rules, but we also put a compliance component between the appraiser and, in most cases, the AMC. That would just be one more step of double checking to make sure that if an appraisal that had that leverage of flexibilities was in play, that we were able to make sure we could make sure that was in compliance. So that was number 3. Number 4, we built, like everybody else in the industry, we built a homeowner inspection app. It's extremely interesting that everybody seemed to have an app. It made sense for us to do it. We work very closely with appraisers, and in support of the flexibilities, we provided a solution that would allow an appraiser to send a survey or an order or link to a homeowner to basically to do a survey on the subject property. Take some photos with all the technology in place to ensure that we geotag the photos, we timestamp the photos, and all those kind of things, and then that data would be delivered back to the appraiser so they could consume that into their appraisal reports. In addition to the inspection information, we also created a PDF of everything that was captured, including all the photos that may or may not make it into the report, so that they could put that into their work file as well. So that was number 4. And the 5th piece of innovation that we provided in support of the flexibilities is we introduced an integration with a service called PropMix, which I believe you're familiar with. And PropMix is really you can think of it as a window into an MLS that an appraiser can leverage using their own credentials and they can search their MLS, they can sift and sort through their MLS. But if a subject property is listed, they can pretty much do a drive-by, a scan of the aerial, collect information on the subject property, and pull that back into their form software, even with a UAD translation on it. So those are really the 5 steps that we took in support of the flexibilities.
Okay, well, let me interrupt one more time with a commercial message. Jim?
Thanks, Joan. We have a message from AMROC. Appraisers that work for AMROC love them so much. We always hear at Valuation Expo, the staff appraisers that they have love their parties and everything. But right now, AMROC is hiring more staff appraisers. Your best career move starts at amroc.com/careers. So you can sign up now. Joan, back to you.
Thank you, Jim. Now let's talk about the future a little bit. And let's talk about appraisal, modernization, sort of what does it mean in the broader sense? And then what is ACI doing to modernize the process?
Yeah, good question. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Hopefully we're not in the middle. Hopefully we're towards the end of a pandemic, but what the pandemic has done, because modernization already started, as we know it. The modernization process really started pre-pandemic. And that was a directive that was given to the GSEs, to really to work independently on. I don't think everyone really understands what all the whole modernization process looks like. I think the UAD and forms redesign often gets confused as modernization. Well, it's not. UAD and forms redesign was already in play. That's a separate initiative where, and that's collaborative also. So you've got Fannie and Freddie working very closely at the direction of FHFA to come up with that next generation digitization of the appraisal process. And we talk a lot about that in CRN too. We've talked about that over the last 10 years, So, and if you look back at UAD, believe it or not, this is our 10-year anniversary. This thing came out 10 years ago. So we've learned a lot, I think everyone's learned a lot. Appraisers have provided tremendous feedback to the, back up to the GSEs and their clients and to the industry, to CRN. So we've learned a lot about that. So that's, while it's not part of modernization, you can't help but not talk about it. So, and I think that's fair because modernization will impact UAD. It will impact the forms redesign. So, and we can come back to that. So, so that's one piece. So, but in terms of modernization, we've got, we have Fannie and Freddie both going down, their paths of modernization, and there's all kinds of things that were in play. And they often refer to it as test and learn. I think we've heard those two words. I call them test and learn and test and burn, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because we learn by burn. You don't touch the stove the second time. So I think it's been a tremendous learning process for all of us. There's been a lot of appraisers out there that have been part of the process, providing both positive feedback as well as constructive feedback. Some of the modernization initiatives out there, revolve around, bifurcation, as part of the process, where a third party does the inspection. I think there's been concern by the appraiser around bifurcation. A lot of it, some of the feedback, at least that you read about in the blogs and hearing at conferences, just through interacting with other professionals. Some of that stems from not trusting the data from a third party, because there's nobody's eyes that are better than mine, There's that. There's also concern over fees. If somebody else is doing the inspection, then I'm only going to get half. And, and those are real concerns that I think we need to voice during this test and learn process, because it's important. And if we want to get to the truth, we want a solution that works. It's got to work for everybody. It can't just work for one side. So I think some of those things are going to come to. We'll get an answer to these questions. But I think that and I think it was in January, Joan. Again, you can keep me honest, but I believe I think a regulator stepped in and paused modernization then. Right around January?
Well, they paused the hybrid pilots.
Right.
Yes.
So, and I think that was, and I don't think that had anything to do with pandemic. So, but I think it was smart.
Correct.
I think it was
that was pre-pandemic. Yes.
And that was a good move. And looking back, I think it was a brilliant move, but not because things weren't working. I think we needed to pause and reflect and adjust. And I think that's happening, because I really don't think modernization stopped. And I think what happened is the pandemic, if anything, accelerated out of necessity. We moved from need, definitely drove speed. And I've heard things that, not in just our industry, across the whole world, but I think the pandemic has accelerated modernization across multiple industries. And I've heard numbers up to 5 years. Who knows, maybe even 10, I don't know. We've definitely have made progress. The technology has something to do with it. We've learned that the LiDAR technology on the phones is doing things like 3D scan, making 3D scans a reality. And I'm not saying that's the answer yet either, but I think we're getting closer to an answer with modernization. And I think that that technology and those solutions will be baked into a workflow that makes sense, that will will still continue to provide the public trust that's currently embedded in the appraisal process today. I think that's really most important. I think appraisers need to really understand that. I keep hearing, well, appraisers need to embrace this technology. Appraisers already embrace this technology, and they've done it for 40 years. And that's not a sell job. That's just the truth. They in the early days, they took us here because lenders would take an appraisal on the back of a napkin. So now that we're able to, with technology, enterprise level technology, we're able to, operationalize it, then this whole thing is just going to get better for all of us. In my opinion.
I agree. I think it's exciting times, and, just reminds me of the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention. And, You're absolutely right. The pandemic, in all its ugliness, though, has inspired a lot of technical advances during this difficult time. Well, in closing, George, any final thoughts, words of wisdom that you want to share with the appraisal community?
I would, again, the first thing I'm going to say is thanks. Just because we are all in this together, and I think that your staff included, Joan. This is a tough year for everything you guys do in terms of bringing the industry together with setting up, making best efforts to pull together virtual trade shows and keeping CRN and education moving forward. That's hopefully next year we're all meeting face to face. But other things I would, my leaving advice would be talk to your clients, listen to your clients first, and continue to give feedback as if you're invited to participate in a modernization program. I would encourage you to do it, because it's your chance to help the process, and at the same time setting yourself up for success as UAD and the new forms redesign hits the street. There hasn't been a date assigned to that, and I think for a number of reasons, but I also think the pandemic really it gave us reason to pause, but it also gave us an opportunity to accelerate and take in more solutions. So just be prepared. I think there's a great opportunity for everyone to participate and help move the industry forward.
Agreed. Jim, do you have one final commercial message for us?
Absolutely. We can't bring you these podcasts without our sponsors. Our third and final sponsor for today is Clearbox. Clearbox is a vendor management platform connecting qualified appraisers with both lenders and AMCs. Save time and money and create your universal approval package that can be forwarded to anyone at any time. If you need to expand, diversify, or upgrade your client list, register today at clearbox.com. Use the coupon code CLEAR10 to save $10 off your background check. Joan and George, thank you so much. That was a great discussion. I really appreciate your time today. And thank you for our listeners for joining us as well. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to hearing from you next time. If you have an idea for a future Buzzcast or would like to be interviewed, reach out to us at info@appraisalbuzz.com. If you're not a subscriber already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.